Hello, I am Lisa Gardner, co-founder of OMS Strategic Advisors and host of the Uncompromised podcast, where we have an unwavering commitment to values, authenticity, beliefs, and integrity, character that brings heart and care to any organization. I'm bringing you some of the business's brightest, uncompromised executives and thought leaders to discuss challenging corporate norms. I am delighted, more than delighted, to introduce Christa Brown Sanford, the trailblazing chair of the Intellectual Property Department and a key member of the Executive and Diversity and Inclusion Committees at her firm. With an impressive background in electrical engineering and a knack for making complex legal matters comprehensible for all, Krysta stands out as a top-tier patent counselor. Her expertise spans from guiding patent procurement to spearheading licensing campaigns in various tech frontiers like telecommunications and artificial intelligence. Beyond her legal prowess, Krista's dedication to education shines through as an adjunct professor at SMU's Dedman School of Law, where she educates the next generation on patent law intricacies. Her community impact is profound, serving on multiple boards and notably as the recent president for the Junior League of Dallas. Welcome, Christa Brown Sanford.
Lisa, I think I need to take you with me everywhere. That was such. Thank you for that introduction.
You know what? I enjoy the introductions. How many times, I thought about this podcast and I said, how often do we get to hear just a sincere introduction of our accolades? This is for the listeners, but I pray that it's also for the guest, because every guest has contributed to their sphere of influence or the particular communities that they are in at great depths. And so it's a way to celebrate our podcast guest as well.
And it's funny because when you're in these environments now and where we are, you are just going. And you never have a time to just pause and reflect.
Yes.
And that minutes of just hearing, it allowed me to just reflect like, oh my goodness, what has happened over the last 3 years? Because a lot of what you just talked about is pretty recent as far as the work that I've done with the Junior League, my role now at the firm. And so I'm excited to get into all that today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to sincerely say thank you for saying yes. I was just telling my previous guest, I said, the season 1 podcast guests are going to be the most special to me because all of you said yes without having a previous season. So I just thank you for entrusting me to do this and allowing to see my vision come through on this. I remember the first time I even met you, Krysta, and we talked at great length about your faith, about your upbringing, and how everything that you were doing was paramount to your upbringing. I think we talked about your parents, we talked about Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship. And so when this podcast was being formed, things were just coming into my mind as far as guests and who I wanted to see and who would fulfill the vision that I believe God had given me. And so you were at the top of the list, as I told you at that event that we were at with the kids. So yeah, this is special.
Yes.
Thank you.
I mean, it truly was divine too, that we ran into each other.
It was. It really was, because I'd already been thinking about you for weeks. And I was like, okay, I need to get her email. I need to get in touch with her. And then there you stood. And I was like, oh my goodness. So
it's meant to be. So
it was great. It was great. Well, let me just start out with just a question that I believe that you will just answer so beautifully for the listeners and just everyone at whatever level that people are in, whether they're executives or whether it's next generation. But what role has your faith played in your life professionally? And how do you incorporate those faith-based practices in your everyday life?
So as far as incorporating into my everyday life, actually what we did to start our conversation is what I do every day. I pray every day. And, now thinking about it, when I was praying this morning with my son in the car, and I want them to hear me pray too every day. So that becomes part of their daily routine. I was praying for them, didn't even pray about my day at all. And so I needed you this morning, Lisa, to pause and just pray for this and what we're talking about, because I did not do that this morning. And I need to do that for my spirit, just to calm my mind. I'm a type A on the go OCD person, and the prayer allows me just to sit back and breathe again. And so that's something that I need to do every day. And with respect to where I am and how faith has played a role in it, I have learned to be more God dependent versus independent. Period.
So,
I need to depend on God in everything that I'm doing to direct my path. One of my favorite scriptures growing up was trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, and all your ways acknowledge him and he will direct your path. I have to remind myself of that every day because, again, I am one who wants to lean on my understanding, and I have to get out of that because I cannot do what God can do, period.
so
And
good.
that's why I need to be God dependent.
Absolutely. That same scripture that you just recited is the scripture that God used with my husband and myself when we started the company 15 years ago. He was teaching us to trust in him and not lean on our own understanding. And there's so much deepness to that scripture, many layers. But that's for another discussion. But that's funny you said that. That scripture is very prevalent in this household to this very day. So, well, tell me what went through your mind and heart, Krysta. And I'm hoping I'm going to sort of frame this question, and I hope it makes sense. So tell me what went through your mind and heart the day you became number one partner at Baker Botts. In the same vein, what went through your heart and mind the day you became the department chair of an intellectual property for Baker Botts. And along those same lines, the day you became the first Black woman president of Junior League of Dallas. All three are big milestones, if not only accomplishments, successes, but in some respect being the pioneer or one of the pioneers in all three of these kind of promotions and positions. Were there any similarities on how you felt on those 3 days? What were the connections of success if you were to connect the dots in all three of these announcements for you? I know that's a lot in that question, but I wanted you to try to tackle that.
And I love this question because I've never thought about those three events in that way and trying to bring together some commonality between them. Of course, I was excited at each time when this happened. And just to give you some perspective too, so I officially made partner January 1st, 2014. And so I learned that I was going to be promoted in November of 2013.
Mm-hmm.
With respect to Junior League, I learned that I was going to be slated as president in November of 2019. And then for department chair, that just recently happened, where I assumed the sole role as the chair in August of 2023. So they're very different points of my life. And what I find that is common between them is that when I started my path in each way, when I started at the firm, when I started in Junior League, I never set out for any of these roles. And I think that sometimes surprises people because they know me and they're like, oh my goodness, you're so ambitious. Well, and I don't know that I necessarily am ambitious, but what I have learned to do is that I need to believe others when they see something in me that I don't see in myself. And so when I first started out as a lawyer at Baker Botts, Lisa, I was like, I'm going to stay here for a year and then I'll leave. And then I'll go work for my dad's company and take that over. And then I saw, oh my goodness, there has not been an African-American partner in our Dallas office. And that was in 2004 when I started at the firm.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until when I made it that there was someone who had been promoted that was an African-American associate to partner. So I was the first African-American associate to make partner in our Dallas office at Baker Botts in 2014.
Wow.
And it's because, I had champions around me. One specific champion who was in my department, he was my mentor, and he really took me under his wing. He was the one that talked about me in the rooms that I wasn't in, and he believed in me. Okay. Similarly, when I didn't think I was going to ever be in that type of leadership role in junior league. I joined to make sure I was being accountable for my volunteer work with my community service. I was a practicing attorney, so there were a lot of time spent in the office, but I needed to get out of that a bit. So I joined the junior league, and it was around my third, fourth year as an active member in the league. And one of my dear friends, who to this day, I mean, I love her and we're close, she said, Krysta, you need to get into leadership in junior league. And she was serving as membership vice president that year. I knew he was going to be the membership vice president the next year, and they encouraged me to put in for new member chair. And that was my first leadership role in the league. Fast forward years later, that person that tapped me was the president. I served on her board, and I was the development vice president that year. And I remember we were at a board meeting, and we were talking about the first Black president of another junior league. It was the Junior League of Memphis, I believe. And someone in our board meeting said, Krysta, you should be our first Black president. I had never thought about it before then. Right. Again, it was someone who saw something in me that I hadn't seen in myself.
That's right.
Look at my department chair role. My mentor, my champion at this firm, I was partner, and it was probably my second or third year. And he was the department chair at the time. And he said, Krysta, I want you to be my deputy. And you know what I said to him, Lisa? I said, I can't. I'm too young. I can't be your deputy. I'm a young partner. I've only been doing this for a couple of years. And I didn't do it. And he came back to me again a year or so later and asked me again. And I knew I couldn't tell him no a second time. So I did it. But it's like he saw something in me that then put me on the path to now be in this position. And so that's the commonality that I've seen throughout these roles that I've been put in, is that I needed to listen to others versus, leaning in and being consumed by imposter syndrome or what I can't do, but to go out on a leap of faith and believe that I could do this.
Absolutely. You hit something very key with discussions I've had with different past CEOs, current just different folks in leadership positions, especially women, that you had a sponsorship, and your sponsorship was healthy. And you said the reason why is because they saw something in you that you didn't see in yourself. And the sponsorship, mentor, whatever you want to call it interchangeably. But we talked about in several episodes how that is very key to the success of being promoted. And you have touched on that with all three promotions of increased territory that I believe God is giving you. Let me ask you this. What role how necessary is sponsorship mentoring, which I know probably what your answer is going to be, and where have you now turned around and given that back within the organizations that you're a part of?
Yeah, so I will say, I do think there's a difference between mentorship and sponsorship, and there's a lot of talks about this, and I will just reiterate here that I agree with those differences. A mentor will kind of show you the ropes. They'll get you filled in on the environment that you're in. And our firm, a mentor can help you figure out getting work, making sure you're not too busy, making sure you're busy enough, can provide guidance on assignments. A sponsor, though, a champion, that's someone who is in the room, who is advocating on your behalf when you're not in the room. That is someone who is doing things within the organization to make moves on your behalf when you don't even realize it's happening. A mentor doesn't necessarily do that. And let's be frank, a lot of mentors are not in the position to do that.
That. Very good.
And so that's why you need a sponsor / champion, whatever. And honestly, that's one of the reasons that I decided to come to Baker Botts, was because I saw someone who I knew would be that person for me. And I encourage everyone who is starting out in business or getting into law firms or some other business, you need to make sure you have that person at the firm and wherever you are, because that can make or break your experience truly. And so where I am now is I recognize the importance of that in my life. And so I actively am working to sponsor those that I have these relationships with. I will say someone was in my office yesterday. She is a young partner, and she's someone that I was not even officially her formal mentor at the firm, but I saw something in her and I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to watch her. And we were talking about, where we are right now in the year-end process for partnership and what she needs to be doing and what I can help her with. And we were talking about work and making sure she is on some good cases that will get her the exposure with the right partners here and the right clients. And I got an email later on after our conversation, and I was like, let's make sure she gets on this case. And then last night she emailed me. She was like, did you do this? And I just sent an emoji to her. It's like, that's my job. That is what I love doing now, is being able to advocate for you, do things behind the scenes when you don't even know it's happening.
Absolutely. There's such a fulfillment in that, isn't there? Absolutely. Especially in the season of life that we're in now, right?
That's
it's
right.
all about the next. Absolutely. So what have been some of the challenges, Krysta, in being a pioneer in your current or past positions professionally or within community engagement?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing for me has been, not seeing how someone has done this before as an African American woman. And there are distinctions, running a section. Yes, I have to look at all the reports. I have to think about partner compensation decisions. I have to think about how people are staying busy, et cetera, et cetera. But then I also have to think about, how am I communicating in executive committee meetings? How am I communicating with my partners? Because just because I am a woman, just because I am African American, there is a difference in how that goes. And the biggest challenge has been figuring out how to navigate that in the different environments in which I am, right? Where I am. So navigating that in the professional environment, and also figuring out how to navigate that in my community environment. And still staying true to the values of who I am. So I think that's been the biggest challenge. But you could say that about a lot of things, is that you don't have the blueprint, but it's just that additional layer of the blueprint plus the identity of who I am and how people respond to that.
Very good. Very well said. This segues into my next question very well. And I believe, Judge Monica Purdy discussed this as well in the third episode. How do you balance the demanding leadership position at your law firm, the positions that you have at your law firm, along with being the mom, the wife, the community leader, and et cetera? What would you say there?
Yeah. So, okay, what I will say is I don't balance, and I don't try to balance. I used to try to balance. Okay. What I do, and this is my goal, Lisa, is to reframe how we are thinking about this in all respects. We've
Oh, I
got
love
to,
it.
okay.
I
Right.
love it.
Balance assumes like there's some equilibrium. As a lawyer, I think about the balance scales and trying to keep things in order. And when I thought about it like that, it brought on stress to me. It brought on pressure. It brought on guilt, because I was trying to keep everything in balance, right? And that's not how my life functions. I imagine if anyone who is a parent, works outside of the home, doing community work, etc., they don't function like that either. You are throwing balls in the air. You're trying to catch the balls. You're trying to throw one ball up really high so it doesn't come down before you have time to run over and get it. And what I have done is, one, I've changed my mindset and gotten out of the sense of balance, and truly just changing how I think about it and leaning into the chaos that exists in my life, and just know that, you know what, at any moment, you can get a call and you got to go run and pick up a child. You can get a call and there's a fire drill with a client. Once I embrace that,
yes,
my perspective changed. I was able to approach the situations in a calm way, in a way that was clear thinking, in a way that allowed me to really strategize and think about, okay, how am I going to work through this? And so that is how I've approached all these various roles. And that's, high level. and more rethinking. Specifically, like, I plan like nobody's business. And the reason I plan and we do a calendar and everybody knows what's going on is because we know it's not going to go according to our plan. And if I have it in line, then when we need to adjust, we're ready to adjust. So it's not like I'm trying to figure things out while I'm adjusting, right? I got the plan, so then I know where I need to adjust in view of the plan that's already been laid out. And then the other thing I do just to keep my mind clear is I know I need 30 minutes to myself a day. I've learned that over the years. I have tried to go, go, go. And what I do is I exercise. I remember there was one time I got home and all the kids were on me. And I said, Mommy needs 30 minutes because I will be a better mom once I work out.
So good. So good. Absolutely true. Absolute truth. You know, what you just said to saying that you got out of the balance and that what you're saying is, I'm giving myself the flexibility that some days may not be as balanced. So what happens is we're not as critical on ourselves as women. I think you're addressing that. You're addressing that you've given yourself some room for grace, right? That and things that they just will not be as perfect as we have planned. And for us to try to equate some kind of number or percentage to the balance and to try to do that every day, I do believe could set you up for failure. But to know that you are going along with just being flexible, that you know some things are going to happen. Yes, you have this family calendar, right? Post it. But you have the family calendar to know, hey, it's not going to go according to plan, and we're ready to move and reposition where we need to be. So it actually gives yourself more of a freedom. There's more freedom in understanding how to juggle all those different positions. Let me know if that's a little bit of what you're saying there.
That is exactly what I'm saying. Yes. And I think when you do that, it allows, quite honestly, and maybe this is not good, it allows you to do other things too. Because I was so bogged down with the pressure, right? That I couldn't take on anything else. And so just changing how I think about it, how my mindset is, that has allowed me to do other things that, again, I don't know that I would have thought they would have been possible.
Absolutely. I think as women, we need to give ourselves that grace. We need to give ourselves that room, because to be critical on ourselves, it stifles everything else about us: innovation, creativity, freedom, just joy. So,
and you know what, Lisa?
What?
Others will be critical of us. Let's not be critical of ourselves. Okay.
Absolutely. We get enough of it on the outside.
Yes.
We don't need it. Right. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Well, let me switch to this. Talked about this with great lengths with several guests, and in fact, the same kind of question here. How do you manage a room, whether professionally or in the community, where very few look like you? Specifically, I just got through talking to someone, when a boardroom, a board table does not look like you, you're the only one who looks like you, right? What has been your practical points of success in doing this in those rooms, in those environments? How do you emerge yourself as one of the leaders as well? How do you emerge yourself as a voice around that table or within that room?
Yeah.
Just in general.
So, one, I don't highlight that I'm one of the few. I think that's pretty obvious. And I know I've seen it happen where that tends to be someone's first thing out of their mouth. And I don't do that. What I do try to do is meet others, get to know others, and start developing relationships. I cannot speak enough about relationships, regardless of who you are, what you look like, what room you are in. When you start developing relationships, that makes the world of difference. One.
Could not agree more.
Two, when I'm in these rooms, my approach is to listen first, speak second, period. I think we are in an environment today where there is so much talk and no listening, and we are not getting anywhere. And I am very intentional with trying to keep my mouth shut, understanding the environment, understanding the situation, the dynamic, to listen, which then leads to learning. So then when I speak, I am impactful because I have taken in information to inform what I'm going to say. And so I try to be myself, but I want to be strategic so I can meaningfully contribute when I'm in these rooms.
Absolutely. I promise you, I'm not even making this up. Literally received the same answer from the guest before you. And
Really?
oh, I mean, identical, which is such confirmation on several levels. But for you to walk in and understand the environment and to listen, even pick up on nonverbal cues, just the whole ship, right? Allows again your answers to be more impactful and in tune so that your changes made. And you absolutely said, absolutely. I think that our listeners will really take that away.
Lisa, let me give you a specific example too, because I joined this
Yes.
board, and it's a board where, again, I was asked to join, and people don't say this. People should not say this. I was asked to join, and I said, I'm too young to be on that board. I need to stop saying that because
Absolutely.
I'm not
Absolutely.
young anymore either.
Yes.
Um,
Well, no, not that. Just the fact is, age is the number, but there are so many folks that are younger with just far beyond their years, and which
yes.
will lead to my next question. But go ahead with your example. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was asked to join this board. It's an incredible board, like really high profile people. And that first year was during COVID. And so all of our meetings were on Zoom.
Mhm.
And the board chair the next year, he was asking me, how my first year had been because we were on Zoom, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, it was actually the best year for me because while on Zoom, I was able to look at all the faces, right, of the board members during a meeting. When
Mhm.
people were talking, I could see how this person was reacting. And I could do it even more on Zoom than I could in person because of how the room is
Absolutely.
situated.
Mhm.
And so I saw all that. I saw who was asking questions, Ren, who was responding, and it allowed me to understand so much about how the board functions, about some of the relationships within the board that I wouldn't have been aware of. Like, no one's going to say that. I just had to watch it. And it was such an incredible learning year to where I think I was able to create an environment where I can make some change and make some impact in a different way if I had not done it. If I didn't have that year on Zoom and just watching those interactions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so much about reading the room, even even in business when dealing with, our clients or just, trying to, gain new business. There's just so much which you could relate to as well in gaining clients, managing clients and gaining new clients is that you have to read the room. You
Mm-hmm.
have to read the room. And the nonverbal cues sometimes speak more loudly than what they say.
Absolutely.
Yep, I would agree. Krysta, also in speaking with you, even within our first conversation that we had, one thing that really stood out to me is I walked away and I felt like your parents, your community were very intentional on how they guided you, how they raised you. In other words, experiences that they gave you spiritually, academically, socially, professionally, and personally prepared you for where you are today. I feel like you lived a very intentional kind of life, that you were raised within an intentional environment. Can you share with the listeners some of those experiences? What were some of those intentionalities that your community, your family gave you to prepare you for where you are today?
Yes, yes. And so I think the biggest thing that has shaped me is where my parents decided to send me to school when I was younger. And so I was at a Christian school, first grade through 12th grade, the same school, grew up with the same people all those years.
Right.
And looking back, I remember in second grade, my second grade teacher went to my mom and she was like, Krista needs to go to a different school. There is a all girls school in town that is really well known. And she told my mom she needs to go to this school. And my mom was like, no, we want her in a Christian environment. And they kept me there. And, while I wasn't necessarily in the most well-known academic environment, it was the best environment because of the Christian base that I got every moment of the day, period.
Absolutely.
And I think that has really set me up and it helps inform my perspective in everything that I do. And I think that was, I think, a significant part of my upbringing. And the second thing I'll mention is just how invested my parents were in everything that I did. They always showed up. And that helped me to see value in what I was doing, to see value in myself, and how they invested in me, regardless of the situation. My parents, my dad owned his own company. My mom was working with my dad. And even still, she was going to be our cheerleading coach, and she was going to be there with my sister and I in that respect all the time. Even when she got Parkinson's, she was still there doing that. And it just speaks volume of how they were willing to give of themselves selflessly. And that informs where I am now with my kids. Even though I am partner at a firm doing community service stuff, I want to show up. Like with my oldest son this year, he's playing football at a new school, and I made a commitment, and I don't think he realizes this, but I made a commitment to be at every game. And Lisa, I have changed business travel. I have changed meetings because I'm going to be at those games on Friday. I want him to know that mom is going to show up, period.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can relate to that same kind of commitment. I don't always sit in the bleachers, but he knows I'm on the sidelines. He knows I'm somewhere, looking at him, and that it's important. Let me switch to this, Krysta. And this was a question that I had not prepared, but it came to my heart when you were speaking, especially about the decision your parents made for you. How do you manage the environments of where you've put your children? How do you keep them grounded in what you and your husband believe in? Sort of the faith-based, value-based kind of foundation. I could pose the same question to us as well. Where our children have gone to school, our son especially. So, just a question there.
Yes. And Lisa, oh my goodness, this is a question that, as now my kids are 16, 14, and 11, we have talked about since they were born.
Yes.
And, funny enough, all three kids were in the school that I went to originally. And they all started out there in kindergarten. And we were really happy with where they were at the time in view of similar experiences. They are being trained in a way every day that is in line with our values as a family. And, this is something my parents didn't have to deal with. And that was a 100-year pandemic that totally changed everything. And I think we previously thought we were going to consider where the kids were going to school every year and really be thoughtful about it. But the pandemic made us do that intentionally. We had to do it. So during the pandemic, we homeschooled the kids, which that's a whole other podcast episode about how you homeschool your children, develop curriculum, and work
at the same time,
build houses, et cetera, et cetera. So
and build houses.
We did that. And then we realized, and I will say I loved it, but they needed to be in a school environment. So we moved them to different schools. We did not send them back to the same school again. And what we've tried to do as they are now in different environments is make sure that they understand who we are as a family and understand where we come from with our value set. That's one reason why we pray every morning before you step in that school door, regardless of what school you're going to. How we are as the Sanford family. Okay. We make sure that our children are getting the word through church too. I think, honestly, just being frank with you, we've got to do better though, because now that we're coming out of the pandemic and we need to be going more in person versus just going online to church. We got in a methodology of, turn it on church on Sunday online, but we need to be going more in person. We've started to do that a bit more. And it is a continued focus for us. I don't think we're perfect, but we are continually trying to just be the best that we can be as parents for our kiddos.
Absolutely. And it's never perfect. Even though, we may go to church, I do feel like, getting especially our son who's 17, more involved in that community is probably the next goal. But again, he, like your son, he's an athlete, goes to school in Dallas, and tough academic curriculum that they both face, right, at the schools they're at. So, it's just, it's a lot, but I think God, he sees our hearts and he knows what we want.
And Lisa, I think, some of the things like at the event that we met at, when we are putting our kids in environments with other families that have similar value sets, that is really important. Where the conversation is just different, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that is helpful for them, especially now when we are in a world where they have access to so much so readily, and it is just astounding what they can get their hands on. Being in those intentional relationships with others of similar value sets will help ground them as they are moving outside of our homes and being in situations where they're having to make decisions on their own.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when they go into their college communities, they'll know what to do and how to connect. Right. That's true. Where in your career, Krysta, could you have compromised, but you made the choice not to? And then let me just ask you, and I'll wait for the next question. Go ahead and answer that one. Yes.
So I have had opportunities to leave the firm where I am and to consider other roles at different firms, at companies. And some of those roles would have been particularly lucrative. And I think, though, that leaving for money would have compromised kind of my path, right? And it would have compromised where I eventually saw myself within the legal industry. And I think we'll get into this a little more too, but I am glad that money was not my North Star, because I think if it is, there are opportunities for you to make compromising decisions that will not benefit you in the long term.
So true. So true. That reminds me, we can never be led by the dollar, but we're led by our purpose and what our calling is, right? And that's what helps us turn down, because opportunities can be good, but they may not be for you, right?
Yes.
There's a lot of things that are good we can make a choice on, but is that good for you? Another term they say, it's good, but is it God? Is it your purpose? Is it your calling? Is it what he wants for you? So very, very good answer. What do you believe you see people compromise the most? What do you believe you see women and people of color compromise the most? Even answer it from that standpoint. So what do you believe you see people compromise, women compromise, or people of color compromise?
It's all the same.
It's all the same.
And it's exactly what I just responded to. And I do recognize there is privilege in this response, right? Because I do have a choice on whether I stay or whether I go to try to get a bigger paycheck, because, there are some situations where, no, you need to go and get a higher salary, whatever it is. And so I do recognize the privilege in my response, but I have seen people that have chased the money and it doesn't end well. I've never seen it end well. And if you have other perspective, other things that you can ground yourself in to, I think, more, not concretely, but to fully analyze whether an opportunity is the right one, where money is not a factor, not the factor, then that makes sense. But when money is the factor, I would really think through whether that's the right decision to make to pursue that opportunity.
There is one thing that I noticed when you talk about women or people of color. I have heard sometimes women do maybe compromise who they are. And, in a male-dominated world, they feel like they have to have more male-dominated kind of characteristics or character or male-dominated kind of personality kind of traits, right? Versus staying their authentic, true self, right? Same with people of color. Sometimes they feel like they have to assimilate into the majority versus really being proud of their cultural norms of who they are, right?
Can I comment on that really fast too?
Yes, yes, please do.
Um, I will say on both. So with respect to women, I am starting to see that happen less. Same with people of color. And the reason I think I'm seeing that is people in leadership roles are being very intentional too about bringing their self every day.
Mm.
So people that are coming up don't
Yes.
feel like they need to change or assimilate or look a certain way in order to fit in. I'll give you an example. So when I had a milestone birthday a few years ago,
Yes.
I decided to do something different with my hair. When I was growing up, every summer I would always get braids, and that was just what I did. I loved it. I was carefree. When I was in law school, I remember when I went to a career services person, and in law school, you clerk at a law firm, and that basically is like your 6 to 8 week interview to determine whether you're going to get a job after law school at the firm. And I asked the career services person, "Hey, I normally, get braids. Is that okay?" And I was told, "Do not get braids. You should not go into a law firm in the summer and have braids in your hair." And that was in 2002, summer 2002.
That was 2002. Okay. Okay.
And so I never wore braids in my hair since then.
Hmm.
And so I was having a milestone birthday, and now I have a daughter who I'm braiding her hair. Quite honestly, it's because it's easier for me and I can't do her hair every day and
Yes.
make sure it's done. And I had a milestone birthday and I was like, I'm going to get braids. Why am I not like I'm saying I'm going to be on my authentic self? I want to make sure those coming up behind me can be themselves, and I'm not living out my truth. Okay.
Hmm.
So I got braids. And Lisa, I showed up the office the next day and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get walked out the door. What people looked. And I remember the D&I director of the firm, she came into my office. She just happened to be in town. And she came into my office that day and she was like, "You got braids." And she said, "I'm going on vacation. And now that I see you in braids, I'm going to get braids too." And so, and it's funny how like that little thing, I think it created a sense of, we can do this here. Why have we not been doing it here? Because someone told us we couldn't 20 some years ago. So
Absolutely.
that is
Absolutely.
my hope, is that I am making change within this environment to allow people to feel that they can bring themselves all day, every day. Now, granted, you got to show up too, but
Right, right. You have to show up and be well prepared with braids, natural hair, and all, right? Be ready,
yes.
right? Okay, so I have a 21-year-old daughter, just to add to this, and she's been my biggest teacher. She's my hero. She decided to do the big chop in high school, and she always had long, just long hair, beautiful hair. And she did the big chop. She grew it back out, and I can't tell you what it did for just for confidence.
Mhm.
Um, she said that, Mom, I would not know how to work without being my authentic self. And I believe this is the generation that is coming up behind us. They don't know any other way but to come as they are. And
Yes.
so for you to show the way, for our, for your generation, my generation, to show the way and make the changes that we believe we could not change, I think is huge. It's
Yes.
huge for those coming, for the Gen Z, Gen Xers, whatever that age group is. And but she has been my biggest teacher in it all, let alone the Crown Act and some legislation that's been put in place, which has helped. But overall, we still have to take that first courageous step. And so I
Mhm.
love hearing that example.
Mhm.
That was freedom for, for you, but more so for those that are watching you,
Yes,
because
that's
you're
very
where
important.
they want to be. that
Mhm.
that's that's incredible. um what indelible mark, Krysta, do you want to leave in the law industry?
We've been talking about it, I think, throughout our entire conversation, but to just be specific, within the legal industry, it has been plagued by the lack of diversity, particularly in the equity partnership ranks. And so, law firms are organized as partnerships, and you have non partners, and then you have partners. And then within the partnership, there are equity partners and non-equity partners. And so like for us, being an equity partner is, kind of the highest level within a partnership. And for Black women, less than 1% of equity partners in law firms in the US are Black women. So not even a percentage point, Lisa. And this is one of the reasons why I've stayed at this firm for 19 years now, is because I want to create an environment where Black women, people of color, women know that you can be successful at a law firm, you can be an equity partner, you can be yourself, you can have a family, you can do work in the community. And so that has been my goal. And truly, I know this is my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I stay here, because I want to create an environment for others to thrive and to change what has happened in the past in this industry, period.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is what I am wanting to do with this career and my phase one. Who knows what phase two is going to be, but in this phase one, this is my purpose.
That is absolutely what I thought you would say. And it is very needed to hear that less than 1% our equitable partners are Black women. We have a ways to go. Absolutely. What are the top 3 character traits you're stressing to your own children so that they will live a life uncompromised?
So 1, I want them to be God dependent,
Mm-hmm.
to know that from the outset. And everything you do, you look to God, you depend on Him for direction. Mm-hmm. 2, I want them to be empathetic. Mm-hmm. And then with empathy, I think there's a lot that comes with that, having perspective, being humble. Mm-hmm. If I can raise 3 empathetic human beings, I think I feel good about that. And then the third thing is to be resilient, especially now. There is so much turmoil. And I see this in young folks coming into our firm. They're so used to just getting the participation trophy, and that's not how life works. Mm-hmm. And for my children to learn how to be resilient, how to respond to challenges, how to see challenges as opportunities and learn from them and grow, that would be awesome. So God dependent, empathetic, and resilient. Those are the 3.
Absolutely. And someone said, I think someone who is definitely in the season of empty nesters, it was another woman who said to me, you just want them to understand their position. Like you just said, understand their position in the communities, to be empathetic, which means that they will end up pouring back into the communities that they serve. So I find that extremely inspiring as far as goals for our children. It's not about it's not about the so-called success or, what they'll become, but, how are they going to be good contributors to their communities that they serve, right? What does that look like? Okay. Any last thoughts, Krysta? I know I need to let you go. Just last thoughts you want the listeners to know. Anything?
Yes. The last thing I would leave the listeners with is to really think about how you approach challenges. And I just said this, but I think it is so important because it has impacted my mindset. And I think it has allowed me to get to the position where I am today. But to reframe how you approach a challenge and start viewing it as an opportunity to grow. When you are in the season of a challenge, instead of thinking, oh my goodness, why is this happening to me? Think, what can I learn from where I am right now? And what I think my husband probably thinks I'm a little different, but when I'm going through something hard, like when I have that day when I just need to cry, I'll tell him, I was like, oh my goodness, the Lord is getting me ready for something. I don't know what it is, but if I'm going through this challenge, I am being prepared for something I can't even imagine.
That's right.
So that's what I would leave people with, is to learn from your challenges, because it will lead to expanded opportunities and possibilities that you can't even imagine.
Absolutely. It's in the valleys where we grow.
Yes.
It's in the valleys. And I have to remind myself of that as well. When I'm crying, when no one's looking, I have to remind myself. And I always say to myself too, exactly what you say, that the Lord is preparing me. It must be for something great, the next level. What is the next step? So good. Krysta, I could continue on, but I know you are on a schedule. This has been delightful for me. It has been real. It has been authentic. As I told just the previous guest, you are fulfilling the vision of why I think that I've been called to do this. I think we need to have more just conversations, short conversations people listen to. It's one step within I say the grassroots level, one step at a time for every listener that will listen to this, that they will be better than when they, before they listen to it. They'll be better after they listen to it. So I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for being a guest.